Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is July the 6th, Sunday actually, and July the 6th, 2025, and today's topic I'm going to call being meticulous because that's basically what I'm going to do. But before we begin, welcome back if you're returning and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day and I use a timer to stay focused and to build a habit. So I'll link to yesterday's video, which I worked on this one. I think I began it yesterday. I don't totally remember. But yeah, I've just been working on these little landscapes, studies basically. They're from reference, so this is from reference. I'm doing it in a way where if you want to either use it for a different subject or like a similar subject, but like just look up a castle or whatever you can, or just some ideas for like pen and ink cross hatching, which is what I'm using. But yeah, let's get started. I'll put a before picture right here, just kind of get warmed up and get started. So I spent 30 minutes from yesterday's video, the end of yesterday's video, and I made it a point to stop at 30 minutes. So this is what I was able to get to in 30 minutes. And there were things that like I saw that I wanted to do, but I wanted to stop because I didn't show any videos of this one. And this took about an hour. However, part of that time was just being methodical about like the color usage. So if you want to use color, you just have to figure out like how that works. These were with color pens. Now this one I didn't have to think about the color, so it went a little bit quicker. Yeah, it was just straight from yesterday's video to here, so you can see that. And I have other videos where I'm doing like the details and stuff. The part of this video will be about like detailing. And I want to call it being meticulous because some of these things I bring up over and over. That's kind of the nature of drawing, is that you sort of bring up the same kind of thing. So for example, like take your time when you're detailing. So for example, I'm going to be meticulous, which I don't know the exact definition. That's just the word that like popped into my head because I have videos where I talk about detailing, but notice that. So I'm using a fine liner, so I'm sticking with that. I mean, I might go in with something else, but that I would call that like fine detail, but this is detailing. So all of like the important stuff was done in like the previous video. Now at this point I'm pushing values, but I'm also making it look more like subtle, establishing like the pattern and the like gradation, as I'm calling it. So for example, since I am working from reference, so at this point, it starts to go away from the reference, and so I'm paying more attention to what the drawing is saying. But like since I used reference, it also helps to look at the reference. But like I'm not gonna fight with the drawing, in other words. So for example, like if the reflection in the water here looks like this, I'm going to make this look good rather than trying to make it look like the reference. But like one thing, for example, is the darkest area and like the most contrast is like right here. So I'm going to use that to compare everything else. If you do have a reference, then it's good if you can turn it into a black and white picture. So when I squint at it, it looks like one, and like build it up gradually, like I always say, and be meticulous about it. So from here, I can push that right here, like the reflection in the water towards this, but it's not quite as dark. Now that's from the photo, but it's also just like a drawing principle and a compositional thing, because that'll have more, like for example, like let's say I do this, it starts to make it look a little bit more like the reference, but also be correct in terms of like the lighting. And then also it looks interesting. But this is where the words like methodical and take your time and like meticulous, which is probably like taking your time and being methodical and being like detailed about it, comes in. So for example, so part of it is the practice. So these principles can be used at any time, but like the more you practice it, I mean, like the better the line like work and stuff is going to be. So there's like little shapes like this that you could go in and start to emphasize and just kind of take your time and and see if like it's like the effect. Like I could push this back more, and it's up to me like how I want to do that. So I'm just, for the most part, doing this vertical kind of cross hatching. For another pass, I could go in and go like, that's just like part of the look. It just depends. But this is what I mean by being meticulous about it, which means that every pen stroke on here was put intentionally. Now, in the initial stage, a lot of the gestural, like sort of what gives it life, was put in pretty spontaneously. And I used a pencil, so when you're using a pencil, I think especially be kind of gestural about it, because since you can erase if you want, and since when you go in and are more meticulous in like detail, it starts to tighten up the drawing, and so you want a lot of the gesture to be in there. So a lot of what looks gestural here, like gives it life, it came from the initial sketch. So I'm not very meticulous when it comes to the sketching, but I'm more meticulous when it comes to detailing. So there's certain things like this where it's part of the style, like because I'm using a pen. So this is kind of a pen and ink style, like cross hatching, like this. Like that's just coming from like the pen. And I wanted to call it being meticulous because when you're using like this fine point, it lends itself to being meticulous, because you can actually, and also because of the scale of the drawing, like it's not like that big, you can actually use this right here, like the stippling. But of course you can apply this to other things like the technique. So that was like really like the main thing. I'm just gonna tighten this up. If I spend another like 30 minutes on it, that would be like an hour total from like what I call like the sketch stage, and it's kind of like this look. Well, not that one, that's like the sketch basically. And I could go in a little bit more with this, but that's part of that is just so I can see like how I did it. As far as like the edges, so you can see here, you don't have to outline everything for this particular technique or for like cross hatching. And I did change it up from like the reference. But that's really it for this. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll put this in the environments playlist. But yeah, I'll wrap up this video. I wanted to keep it kind of short. And I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine. And if you enjoy these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.